Hello and welcome to the Today's Homeowner Weekly Podcast. We're here to help you with the challenges we all face as homeowners. I'm Danny Lifford.
And I'm Joe Truini. And each week, Danny and I are here on the podcast to answer any and all home improvement questions.
And we want to hear from you. Send us your questions or comments at todayshomeowner.com/podcast.
Okay, Danny, let's get started.
Today's Homeowner Podcast is brought to you by the Home Depot. How doers get more done.
This week, we explore a number of ways of getting stains off of concrete, also looking at excessive moisture in your home that's going to lead to some really bad smells. What can you do? And what are the main 3 things you need to do to really lower that moisture in your home? Also, how to choke out the weeds by using the right landscape fabric, and tips on installing attic insulation. And Joe, what do you have for us on the simple solution?
I've got a tip on how to paint the tops of the walls when you're in a room that has a textured ceiling, because sometimes it's hard to paint cutting around the tops of the walls without getting paint on the textured surface. So I have a really quick tip that I learned from a professional painter on how to do that neatly.
Everybody loves those painting tips. All right, let's get started. Let's get right to Melody, who's on the phone from Mississippi with a little problem with her concrete. Melody, welcome to the Today's Homeowner Radio Show.
Thank you so much.
Tell us what's going on there and what happened to your front porch.
Well, my husband had a battery sitting on the concrete on the front porch, and when he picked it up, there's battery acid stains on the concrete, and it looks horrible. So I'm wondering, is there something that I can do to remove that stain?
Well, it is a challenge anytime you have a stain of any kind on concrete, because the majority of concrete is not sealed with a masonry sealer, a clear masonry sealer, which we would recommend on any porch, driveway, sidewalk, anything. It just makes the concrete look better, longer, and last longer. But when you have something like that, ironically, one of the first things you use to clean a concrete surface is another acid, muriatic acid. Now, muriatic acid is a strong, dangerous acid, so you need to be very, very careful when you're using it, and you need to dilute it. And that depends, I think it's a 3-to-1 dilution with 3 parts water to be able to dilute it down, and you can put it on there. As soon as you apply it, it'll start bubbling. You'll see the reaction to the other acid stain, and generally that will lift it out. You may have to do it a couple times. Have your water hose handy to, flush it out really well after you finish it. And like many, many stains on different surfaces, not one thing takes care of it all. So you may have to try a combination of results. Joe, what other suggestion would you have for Melody?
Yeah, Melody, I was going to suggest the same thing, but ordinarily muriatic acid is a last resort because it is so caustic. As Danny said, if you have to use muriatic acid, just be extremely careful with wearing all the safety gear. But what you could try, if you don't want to go right to that, you could try, there's a product called Oxalic Acid, which is Oxalic. You can get it at drugstores and supermarkets, hardware stores. And it's a powder. You dissolve it in warm water. I forget exactly what the ratio is, but it'll say it on the package. And you brush it onto the stain. You let it sit 15 or 20 minutes. Keep it wet. Keep the stain wet. And then you can scrub it with a nylon bristle brush. Never use a wire brush on concrete. Seems like it's a good idea, but what you would do is the wire brush would change the texture of the concrete, and even if it's clean, you'll see where you clean. So use a nylon bristle brush. Then rinse it well after any treatment, even muriatic acid. Rinse the area really well with water. And if the oxalic acid doesn't work, you could just try chlorine bleach straight, just regular old liquid chlorine bleach. Let it sit for a while and then scrub it and rinse it. So that I would probably start with either the chlorine bleach, because you probably have it. And if that doesn't work, go to oxalic acid. And then last resort would probably be the muriatic acid.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hey, our pleasure.
Let us know how it works out, by the way.
And, if all else fails, you could stain the concrete with an over stain over the whole thing. And sometimes a stain will kind of come up through that stain that you apply, but overall it generally will look a lot better. But Melody, thanks so much for being a part of the show this week.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
Okay, you as well. Hey, let's go to South Carolina right now. Randy's on the phone. Randy, welcome to the Today's Homeowner Radio Show.
Hi, Danny and Joe.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Understand you're pondering an idea about a screen porch. Tell us about it. We're looking at the photos right now that you sent.
Oh, okay. I have a deck that we want to take approximately half of it and put it under the screened roof. Okay, and the problem we got is my house is a cross-gabled roof, and how to get that roofing to blend and go out 20 feet from the cross-gabled area, because the roof and the cross-gable are at 90 degrees to each other, and it's about a 10-12 pitch. That's my question.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have seen people make the mistake of putting just a little flat roof in that area. And then you have all of that water going down on it. You have all of that valley water coming down on it. And you miss an opportunity for a really nice porch by putting in a traditional roof that would blend into the architectural lines of your house. Now, that may seem like a lot of overkill to build that much of a roof that will follow those gable lines. But the thing about it, so many times when you're looking at a porch, and I've done this many, many times where we build a screen porch, and people use it so much, they want to go ahead and turn it into a room. Well, if you build the roof right, then you have the hardest part of that next step already taken care of. Then you can do the insulating, and you can do that. I've also built a lot of them utilizing that elevated space there for a vaulted area for a screen porch, which has the advantage that the heat rises and it's actually cooler where you're sitting and so forth. So it might sound like a lot more work than you really want to do, but it is the right way to do it. That way you can keep the same pitch of the roof, you can use the shingles, and if you'll get a draftsman, I don't think you need necessarily an architect, but if you get a draftsman just to draw the lines and draw this out, it's pretty simple. Then that'll give you something that you can show to several remodeling contractors to get prices and just to see what it is. These lumber prices are going down, so hopefully it won't be as expensive as you might anticipate.
All right. That was my fear. I'd have somebody come in and quote it, and I'd get a figure that would jar my teeth.
But the thing is, Randy, and this is an important question for you to ask those prospective contractors, is this something that you routinely do? Is this something that they've done a lot? And, you'll know right away. But if you call your local home builders association and get a few names of some good, reputable remodeling contractors, I guarantee you they've done this project a lot. And they can probably add a few suggestions along the way that'll make it like a really nice screen porch that can then evolve to a room or sunroom if you decide to do that later.
Okay.
All right, Randy, thank you very much for being part of the show. Let us know if we can help you any other way.
Great, thank you.
DIY means sawdust, work gloves, and the right tools. But at the Home Depot, the right tools means more than hammers and saws. It means a mobile app with built-in image search. That's a tool. Access an entire rental department with a swipe. That's another tool. For any project, start to finish, this isn't just DIY. This is doing like never before. This is the Home Depot, how doers get more done. Download our mobile app to get started.
Right now, Marion is on the phone. Marion, welcome to the Today's Homeowner Radio Show.
Hello, how are you? Danny and Joe, how are you?
Hey, we're doing great. Tell us about your challenges. Now, you live in California and you have a house in Mississippi, is that right?
Yeah, recently we bought a house in California, in Mississippi, and my mother and my brother moved over there, and they said that it's a moisture problem, and sometimes they can see it on their walls, and there's like a musty odor that doesn't want to go away.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot get rid of it. We clean the house, but we feel the same odor.
Okay. Do you know if it has central air and heating in it? Does it have a central air and heat system?
It's an old house, and it has the air is on the floor.
Uh-huh. Okay.
That's where we get the air conditioning or the heat coming from.
Okay.
And I don't know if it is central, so I haven't really asked my brother. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A couple main things here is, first of all, and do you know if the house is up on piers? Is there crawl space under the house, or is it on a concrete slab?
It's a crawl space under.
Okay. All right. Well, two things need to happen right away is, first of all, in the crawl space, you want to make sure that you have a layer of plastic laying on the ground, just right on the ground to prevent any of that moisture from migrating up to the house. And the second thing is to call that air conditioning contractor, because the main thing a properly working air conditioning does is to remove the moisture out of the house. And obviously something's not working there. Either the unit is just simply not doing its job, or it's oversized to where it's turning on and turning off too quickly. So those would be the first two things that I would do, because, and of course, encourage those that are living in the house to use the exhaust fans in the bathroom as well in the kitchen every single time. Like when they're taking a shower, to turn that exhaust fan on and leave it on for at least 10 minutes after the shower. Now, this is all assuming that there are exhaust fans in there. If not, that would be another really important thing to do.
Yeah, that would be great. I have to ask about the exhaust fans. Yeah.
It's all about getting that moisture out of the air from the inside, and also preventing any intrusion of moisture coming in around windows and doors or anything like that, to really seal all of those windows and doors and cracks on the outside of the house. So these are some fairly simple things that'll make an immediate difference in that moisture content inside the home.
Mm-hmm. And they were telling me also, Danny, that when they clean, in some of the areas of the shower, they found close to the floor, when they cleaned it was really moldy. It was dark and very the smell was very strong there.
Yeah, not unusual at all for that to be the case, because when you have that amount of moisture in a house, there's definitely going to be mold and mildew that grow there, which is really unsettling and not very healthy at all. One more thing, the more the house can be open, the better. On mild days, open all the windows and doors, get some fans blowing. The more fresh air you get in there, the better it's going to kind of mitigate a lot of the mold spores and that type of thing. Very, very important to get as much fresh air in as you can. Marion, I certainly hope that helps, and hope you can kind of dry that house out. Let's get another email in here. Irene from Missouri. How can I repair my plastic laminate backsplash that has pulled away from the particle board behind the kitchen faucet? Hope I don't have to replace the whole countertop. Boy, I'll tell you, Joe, once that particle board countertop starts separating, most of the time it's separating because water's gotten in there and it has started swelling up like a sponge. And you're not going to you can dry it out, but you're not going to get it to go back to its original size.
Right.
Now, if it hasn't gone too far for Irene, of course, she can try to glue any of the pieces there and kind of clamp it off anyway, kind of support it any way she can. And then it's just going to be a matter of caulking to keep it from getting any worse. Now, that might not be the most, pleasing look for the countertop, but it might allow her to wait a little bit before she actually has to replace that countertop. And unfortunately, on countertops, you can't replace just a little piece of it.
Right. And chances are, we're hoping that this is just the backsplash that has swollen and pushed the laminate off. So I would just, and it's almost impossible to repair, I would just pull off that backsplash, that plastic laminate backsplash, and replace it with something that's not going to rot, or not going to swell. It could be solid surfacing, it could be metal, it could be a tile. But at that point, you'd get a chance to look at the countertop, make sure that's not damaged. And part of the reason that happens is that whenever someone makes, 99% of the time, when they make that backsplash out of plastic laminate, they put plastic laminate on the top edge and on the face of it, which makes sense. But when I worked at a cabinet shop, we always put a strip of laminate on the very bottom edge. And the reason was you'd never see it. But the reason is it helps protect it from the water seeping up and then being soaked into the particle board, because you have that plastic laminate there. At this point, there's nothing she could do, but I would recommend tearing it out and replacing it either with a new backsplash built correctly, or, like I said, solid surfacing or tile or something like that.
You hear people talking about, I would not have a bit of particle board in my kitchen. I'm going to have all real wood. And, Particle board's not a bad thing, especially the new generation particle boards,
Right.
if you don't have water getting to it. And
Exactly.
really, basically, any interior type of wood, you get any water that introduces into it, it's not going to last forever. And some of the older particle boards seem to absorb it a lot more, and it'll absolutely just fall apart.
Right. And so some people say, okay, then I'm going to go to MDF, medium density fiberboard, which is a much better, much more stable product. But if you're going to use that in a situation where it might get damp, they do make moisture resistant MDF. And that would be the thing to use, because that too, the standard product will swell up if it gets wet.
Time for our Home Depot Best New Product of the Week, How Doers Get More Done. If you have a toilet that constantly runs, you know it's annoying and wasteful, or maybe it feels real slow and makes a lot of noise in the process. That could be so aggravating around your home. If so, the Corky 2X Long Life Toilet Fill Valve may be just your solution. It's the longest lasting, most universal toilet fill valve available. The rubber formulation resists any chlorine or hard water, bacteria, and rust, so it lasts 2 times longer than other fill valves and can boast a 10-year warranty. Plus, it's quieter than other fill valves. It's ideal for toilets built since 1994 with a 1.6-gallon flush, and it's fully adjustable to prevent wasting water in any toilet. The refilled adjuster delivers just the right amount of water to maintain original performance, and the valve is easy to install with no tools required. The innovative twist lock adjustment also makes it very easy to adjust it, and it works both for large and compact toilet tanks. Now, it's called the Corky, with a K, 2X Long Life Toilet Fill Valve, and you can find out more by going to todayshomeowner.com. Let's go back to the Today's Homeowner hotline now with the landscape question.
Our landscaper was going to do our backyard with rock. It hasn't happened, so I decided to do it myself. I remember him saying something about not using that black plastic, that it's not the best kind of plastic to use, but I cannot remember what kind he said to use. We're trying to keep the weeds out, and we don't want to have to redo the backyard again.
Okay, probably what the landscaper's talking about is a black plastic that you don't want to use. That doesn't allow the water, rain, and moisture and everything to penetrate down into the roots. It will block the weeds out, but it's not going to be healthy for the plants at all. What you really need to use there, Joe, of course, is the landscape fabric that allows that water to run through it.
Exactly. Karen, what you need to do first, congratulations for doing this yourself. I think that's a great idea. But yeah, you want to do is level out the ground as much as you can, pull out any weeds and get it as clean as you can get it, and then lay down some landscape fabric. It's basically just black fabric, and it comes in various widths. I would recommend, if you need to, you typically come 3 or 4 foot wide, but if you have a wider area, I would recommend go to a professional landscaper and buy a really wide roll and just do one big swath of it, because then you don't have the seams, and sometimes those seams can shift and open up, and then of course you get weeds growing through them. So if you're going to have to overlap it by at least 6 or 8 inches. But in any case, yeah, I think what he was referring to is landscape fabric, not plastic at all.
Yeah, it's well worth the time to be able to choke out those weeds. And also there's a lot of amendments that you can add that will attack those weeds, when they're just starting to sprout up. If you just go at it strong like that, you can keep those weeds from popping up. 800-946-4420. And that's where we received this call from Phil in New York.
My original attic insulation had the vapor barrier facing up. Now I want to add more insulation to the attic, and I'm confused. Is the old one was installed improperly? I need some help as far as what should I do with the old. Should I turn it around, or should I rip the paper off?
Wow. Well,
it's hard to believe people are still installing insulation the wrong way.
I know.
You often say you have a 50-50 chance, right?
A 50-50 chance. That's like laying sod out in the yard.
Green side up.
You wouldn't lay the green side down, would you? No, you wouldn't. But, Phil, the insulation is installed improperly. And it's a really simple rule here. Now, first of all, I understand that in some ways logic would say, that the paper goes up for whatever reason, but it doesn't. It always faces the area that's heated and cooled. So if you're under your house, the paper goes up towards the heated and cooled area. If you're in your attic, it goes down. So you should be just seeing raw insulation when you're looking at it. So I think it would be next to impossible to remove the paper. It's certainly not a very fun job to flip all of that insulation over, but that is what needs to be done. I almost question, Joe, about taking a razor knife and cutting several streaks down that. Still wouldn't be as good as it being all integrated together, would you think?
Yeah, probably not. But I think what he could do is just pull it up, try to be as careful. We're assuming this is stapled down. If it's not stapled down, that makes it even easier. But if it's stapled, just carefully rip up the flange, the paper flange around, the edges of the insulation, and just turn it over with the paper facing down, and then he can add more insulation. Because if he only has that bit of insulation, we already know it's not enough.
That's right.
So, especially in New York, he needs 14 to 16 inches of insulation. He probably has 8. So I would flip it over, and then what do you put on top? Well, then you'd put unfaced insulation. And if you're doing it yourself, the easiest thing is to get unfaced bats of insulation and run it perpendicular, not parallel with the joist. So this way you're covering up any gaps in the insulation. And rock wool would be a great way to go. It's really easy to handle. It's got great energy efficiency. So, and if not, you want to hire someone, they can come and blow in some loose insulation or put in bats themselves.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing at the Chelsea's Ranch Revival, the project that we're working on my daughter Chelsea's home, where she has a house. It was built in 1956, and it has just basic insulation in it. Fortunately, it was installed properly, but it just barely comes up to the top of the joist. So we're using an R30 rock wool insulation that is a mineral wool, running it perpendicular, and she's going to have like a very, very well insulated house, even though it was built in the middle 50s. And it's really not going to be that hard because, when you're putting it perpendicular on top of the ceiling joist, you're pretty much up above anything that you have to cut around. Any of your exhaust vents and plumbing vents, certainly you have to cut around. But there again, with the mineral wool, it's one of the easiest type of insulations to cut, because you could just use a bread knife, basically, to cut around it. And very, very easy to fit it nice and tight to create that blanket effect in the entire attic. But just a couple rules when you're thinking about attic insulation. First of all, don't be tempted to force it out into the overhang or soffit areas of the home. You want that little area above the top of the wall and the bottom of the roof decking to remain open. That's where your fresh air should be coming in from your soffit vents that will then travel up through your ridge vent or your power exhaust vent, whatever you have to get rid of that hot, moist air. But if you don't have anything like a ridge vent, which is a passive way for that heat to move out, or you don't have an exhaust fan, do that right now. That you really need to do that no matter where you live in the country. But and another thing we talk about a lot is you don't have to do the whole attic at one time. If you're that ambitious and have that much time and energy, go at it. But otherwise, most people get a little tired after a little while, and especially this time of year where it gets very, very warm in an attic, and you might just want to do a couple areas, take a break, do a couple more areas, maybe wait another day. But every piece of insulation you put in there is one step closer to having the most energy efficient house that you can. Very, very important on that.
And the other thing is, while you're insulating an attic, it's a great time to get a tube of fire-resistant caulk. This is code required, by the way, so it should have been done, but depending on the age of your home, it might not have been. Any penetration in the ceiling, we're talking about pipes and cables and wires or whatever, anything that's poking a hole through the ceiling, through into the attic, should be sealed. And this is a caulk. It's usually kind of reddish in color, dark red in color, and it dries really hard, and it's fire resistant, of course. And the whole idea is to stop if a fire does break out, it's not going to get up into the attic and set the whole roof on fire. So that's the opportunity to seal all those. And it's a lot easier to do from up above than from down below. So take that into consideration too when you're insulating an attic.
And we have a lot of this information waiting on you right now at todayshomeowner.com. Just put in insulation or insulating your attic in the search engine to be able to get a lot of information. This is the time of the year where we're all feeling the heat. And if you're in the market for a new roof, our friends at the Metal Roofing Alliance want to remind you that metal is one of the most energy-efficient roofing materials available anywhere. In fact, a metal cool roof reflects the solar solar heat that you'll have. You also are able to keep your home a lot cooler and saving energy by remitting most of what solar radiation is absorbed. Cool metal roofs can lower roof temperatures by as much as 50%. I know that got your attention, and you can find out more by going to metalroofing.com. Great way to consider kind of trying to save as much energy as you possibly can.
DIY means sawdust, work gloves, and the right tools. But at the Home Depot, the right tools means more than hammers and saws. It means a mobile app with built-in image search. That's a tool. Access an entire rental department with a swipe. That's another tool. For any project, start to finish, this isn't just DIY. This is doing like never before. This is the Home Depot. How doers get more done. Download our mobile app to get started.
Let's switch gears right now and see if we can learn a little tidbit of information from Joe with this week's simple solution.
All right, Danny, here you go. When painting the walls of a room that has a textured ceiling, typically it's a popcorn ceiling, but there are other types of textured ceilings. It's almost impossible not to get paint on the protruding texture as you're painting around the tops of the walls as you're cutting in. So here's how to neatly and easily paint along the tops of those walls. What you can do is get a slotted screwdriver. By the way, this is a tip I learned from a professional painter, and it works really great. So you're going to get a slotted screwdriver, and you basically just run it along the top of the walls, scraping a little bit of texture from the ceiling. So you're cutting a groove into the ceiling around the perimeter of the room. And then when you go back to brush on the paint when you're cutting in, you fan out those bristles a little bit as you press the paintbrush against the wall, and the little groove that you just cut, the paintbrush bristles will glide right into that. You won't get any paint on the ceiling, and you can cut in around the whole room. So that's the trick. Cut that little groove first. And by the way, once the walls are painted, you'll never notice that groove, because we're talking about, it's probably less than 1/8 of an inch. You'll never notice it.
Boy, I can visualize that very, very well with spreading the bristles out on the wall and the bristles extending up into that groove, basically filling up the groove, but providing you that separation between the wall and the ceiling. And I'll bet there's a number of people sitting there right now, they just slapped their knee and said, I wish I'd have known that last week.
I'm glad I'm not in the room with them. They would have slapped me. Like, why didn't you tell me that sooner?
Matter of fact, they may be looking up at the ceiling right now going, or the wife may be looking up going, yeah, we should have known that, buddy,
Because if you get paint, even a little bit of paint on a popcorn ceiling, then what do? Then you get it off, So you have to try to match the paint, and then you get it on the wall, and it doesn't quite match. So, yeah, it's really, this is a great little tip. When I first saw it, I thought, I have to share this with the radio audience.
Well, we talk a lot about popcorn ceilings, and most what we talk about these days is removing popcorn ceilings. And if you're considering that, you have to go by todayshomeowner.com and check out all of the videos, the special formula that we put together that works very, very well in allowing you to scrape off the popcorn with little or no damage to the existing ceiling, and a few of the tips on making it a very easy, I almost said enjoyable, but we're not going to go that far.
Not quite enjoyable. But.
A very easy way of removing that texture. And like so many things we talk about, you can do it one room at a time, and that makes it a lot easier. Now it's time for our podcast question of the week that comes from Brian in Iowa. 20 years ago, I used a product that was an epoxy coating for my garage floor. It needs a new covering now, so do I need to remove that one before I install another coat on top of it? Well, Joe, that's like a lot of painted surfaces. I think if there's no real problem with it, if there's not a lot of excessive peeling, then I think some really good cleaning, maybe a little bit of sanding with something like an 80 grit paper, and then of course wipe off all the dust, probably all that's needed for the prep on that.
That's exactly right. If it's if the old epoxy floor coating is peeling or blistering or delaminating or anything like that, or if there's lots of bare spots where bare concrete is showing, then you shouldn't be applying new epoxy over it, because it might fail. You'd have to, unfortunately, grind it off. You have to rent the machine and just grind it back down to concrete. If it's in good condition, you can apply a new epoxy coating over it, but, and this is really important, that most epoxy floor finishes, after they're dry, they put a clear coat on top, and that clear coat has to be removed. So, because the old epoxy won't adhere to it. So you'd have to remove that as well. And depending on, you'd have to check with the manufacturer to see the best way to remove that clear sealer. But that would have to be removed first so that the new paint can adhere to it.
There you go. That should be all the steps you need, Brian, to a very successful recoating of your garage floor. That sounds like a great project for this weekend. Hey, we want to hear from you. If you have any questions whatsoever for us, you can send them to us at todayshomeowner.com/podcast. I always appreciate those great reviews, those great comments we get, and keep them coming and keep listening to the Today's Homeowner podcast. I'm Danny Lippert along with my buddy Joe Truini. We'll see you soon.